next speaker is Zhongfeng Tian. He's a PhD student at Boston College, majoring in curriculum and instruction with a specialization in language, literacy, and culture. He's a bilingual speaker of Mandarin and English. Prior to BC, he earned his master's degree in TESOL at Boston University. He has taught EFL, ESL, and Mandarin to students of different age groups and cultural and linguistic backgrounds in China, Cambodia, and the US. As a language educator, he acknowledges and values students' diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds and invites them to bring their voices and stories into classroom. As a researcher, he is interested in bilingualism, language and literacy development, and especially translanguaging. So here's Zhongfeng with his talk, Translanguaging Beyond Monolingual Ideologies. Let's welcome.
So today, we are going to talk about languages, the most basic tool for communication. So before starting my talk, I'd like to ask you several questions. So how many of you speak languages other than English? Please raise your hand. What languages do you speak? Just shout it out. Spanish? Uh-huh. So I'd like to ask you a further question. So when you communicate with your bilingual friends, how do you communicate with each other? So take myself as an example. I'm from China originally, so I'm a bilingual speaker of Mandarin and English. I can also understand 70% of Cantonese. So when I communicate with my Chinese friends, I sometimes speak a little bit Mandarin and sometimes speak a little bit English. I just matched all the languages I know to communicate with my friends, to make sense, to make meaning. So that is actually translanguaging. So what is translanguaging? According to the definition, so translanguaging, in your mind, there is only one linguistic system. And within this linguistic system, there are different diverse linguistic features within this one linguistic system. And when you communicate with your friends, you just pull out or select the different features from this linguistic system to make sense, to make meaning. So it is a holistic, dynamic, and fluid view to look at bilingualism and how bilingual and multilingual people communicate with each other. And actually, this term is not created by me. I should give a credit to Professor Ofelia Garcia, who is the professor at the Graduate Center of City University of New York. Her major areas are bilingualism, bilingual education, and especially translanguaging. Well, someone may argue with me, are you just saying this is another version of code switching? Because we are so familiar with code switching. Well, my answer is, it's not. It's quite different from code switching. So for code switching, we are still saying that you have two linguistic systems, which are L1 and L2 in your mind. And when you communicate with your friends, you are just switching back and forth between these two linguistic systems. So it's still a separate, a monolingual and static view to look at language behaviors of bilingual people. So to have a quick ramp up, for translanguaging and code switching, actually we are taking different perspectives to look at this kind of language behavior or phenomenon. So for code switching, you are standing outside of the speaker. Oh, you are switching back and forth between L1 and L2. Well, if you stand inside the speaker's perspective, you are just to pull up different linguistic features. You are just to select different linguistic features strategically to make sense, to make meaning. Again, take myself as an example. So in the society, I may be recognized as a speaker of Mandarin and English. But if you ask myself, if you stand the internal of myself, I'm neither a speaker of Mandarin nor English. I just have different linguistic features. Sometimes I pull out some Mandarin linguistic features. Sometimes I pull out some English linguistic features. Sometimes I just select both of them to make sense, to construct my identity, to communicate with my friends. So now we have this fantastic concept of translanguaging, a new perspective to look at bilingualism. So why don't we bring this concept into our classroom to benefit the large number of English language learners in the United States. Because right now, the current landscape of the United States, we have a large number of English language learners across all the 50 states. Although the majority are speaking Spanish, but as a group, they speak a variety of over 150 languages. They come from different culture, linguistic, and educational backgrounds. However, the language educational policies in the US here are not quite in favor of linguistic diversity and complexity. What we focus on is English-only instruction. We only care about English skills. We shut down the opportunities for the development of multilingualism. So first thing I want to say, instead of calling our students as English language learners, which is only focused on their absence of English skills, we should call them emergent bilinguals to focus on their potential of becoming a bilingual or multilingual person. And then we should use translanguaging as pedagogy. We should implement translanguaging as pedagogy in real classroom practices. We should create safe spaces for them to allow them to draw upon their linguistic features from their linguistic system to make sense, to understand meaning and content. Well, that is not the whole picture. It's not just to say, let's have a linguistic party. You can use whatever languages you like. Let's just celebrate diversity. Because we are still in the United States. We have to acquire academic English skills in order to survive in this society. So in a translanguaging educational model, on one side, teachers should start from a place where can leverage students' linguistic complexity and treat them as resources. While on the other side, we should also show them when, where, and why to pull out some linguistic features and not others, enabling them to perform according to the social norms of languages in schools. So if you are an educator, if you are interested in bringing translanguaging as pedagogy in your classroom, here are some teaching tips I want to provide you. So like first, you can provide some translations in the instructions of the worksheet when you give your students. You can use Google Translator. Well, someone may say, I don't trust the Google Translator. Well, that is the cool thing here. The translations don't have to be perfect. In that context, you can ask the students, do these translations sound natural in your home language? You position yourself as a co-learner. You are empowering your students. You let them know it's totally okay that your home languages are welcome here in this classroom. Well, the second is a grouping strategy. You can group your students based on their same home language backgrounds. When they have classroom discussions, they can co-construct the meaning. They can use whatever languages they feel comfortable during the group discussions. And your role as a teacher is just to stand back and give them enough space and time to allow them to digest the content. Well, the third strategy, you can create some free writing activities. Like I treat them as a development process. Like for the first draft, you can ask them to write whatever languages you feel comfortable in your first draft. And then maybe to the final project, you can ask them to submit an English-only writing project. And the fourth one, you should make cross-cultural connections. You should choose some immigrant stories that resonate with their lives. Well, the last one strategy is try to use multilingual and multimodal resources, such as pictures, videos. Also, at the same time, we should be aware of some challenges of implementing translanguaging as pedagogy in real classroom practices. The first one is the lack of teacher training, because teachers are not trained in this way to use translanguaging as their teaching concept. The second one is the administrative and school leadership level. You have to negotiate with the leadership level, the people from that level, to try to persuade them to use translanguaging as pedagogy in your classroom. In a summary, by using translanguaging, this student-centered approach, you are creating a linguistically inclusive classroom instead of making your classroom become an English-only policing zone. And translanguaging is a culturally sustaining pedagogy. It supports young people maintaining their culture and linguistic competence, while also showing them access to the dominant culture competence. Translanguaging can not only function as a scaffold to support students their understanding of content and knowledge, while also it has the transformative power to challenge the hegemony of English to make education more just and equitable to language minorities. Thank you.